Hello and welcome. My name is Danielle Harris, Deputy Director for the Division of Medication Error Prevention and Analysis, and today I will talk about best practices for proprietary name design. Our learning objectives for this session will be to understand what contributes to medication errors due to proprietary name confusion, understand the purpose of the draft guidance for industry entitled Best Practices in Developing Proprietary Names for Drugs, understand FDA's current thinking on how to develop proprietary names that are safe and don't contribute to violations of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And finally, to understand FDA's process for evaluating proposed proprietary names. As a reminder, FDA has two guidances related to proprietary naming. The first guidance, entitled Contents of a Complete Submission for the Evaluation of Proprietary Names, remains largely unchanged since finalized in 2010. This guidance is intended to assist industry in how to submit a proprietary name for review and what to include in the submission. In May of 2014, FDA issued draft guidance entitled Best Practices in Developing Proprietary Names for Drugs. This guidance is intended to help sponsors develop proprietary names that do not cause or contribute to name confusion. We also have two manuals of policies and procedures, or MAPs, related to proprietary naming. The first, entitled Procedures for Handling Requests for Proprietary Name Review, describes the procedures used by CDER staff following receipt of a proprietary name submission and defines the roles and responsibilities for various staff within CDER. The second MAP, entitled Procedures for Sharing Non-Public Information on Pending Proposed Proprietary Names, was published in the fall of 2016. This map describes the procedures for CDER staff to use when we identify that two or more proposed proprietary names are in conflict with each other. I'll also note that the CDER guidance agenda on new and revised draft guidances CDER plans to publish during 2020 includes a draft guidance entitled Best Practices in Developing Proprietary Names for Human Non-Prescription Drug Products. I've provided hyperlinks to each of those relevant documents in the resource slides at the end of this presentation. However, to meet today's objectives, I'll be discussing the draft guidance for industry, best practices in developing proprietary names for drugs. I'll also provide updates to our current thinking on topics contained within this guidance. The proprietary name is a critical element used to identify a drug product during the medication use process. Proprietary names that are misleading or similar when spoken, written, or in their spelling may lead to wrong drug medication errors. If end users cannot easily distinguish the proprietary name from other drug names, the patient or consumer may receive the wrong drug product. Our naming guidance focuses on the design of proprietary names and describes the best practices for proprietary name development to help minimize name-related medication errors. It describes the framework that FDA uses to evaluate proposed proprietary names and also provides a systematic and transparent approach to name evaluation that sponsors may choose to use when they develop proprietary names. For ease of use, the guidance is organized into several sections, many of which I'll go over today, including how we pre-screen proposed proprietary name for error-prone attributes, additional best practices that we encourage as sponsors to use when designing proprietary names, how we conduct our misbranding review, and the methods that FDA uses for evaluating the similarity of a proposed name to other names, including the use of name simulation studies and FDA's phonetic and orthographic computer analysis, also known as POCA. First, let's touch on some contributing factors to proprietary name confusion. We know that environmental and human factors such as stressful work environments, frequent interruptions and distractions, and poor lighting and noise levels may contribute to medication errors. However, when it comes to name confusion, there's additional contributing factors to consider. You may have seen this slide before in other presentations. However, I'd like you to take a minute and read the paragraph shown on the slide. What you'll notice is that you'll be able to read the slide despite the letters being jumbled up in each of the words. Confirmation bias is the tendency to interpret or recall information in a way that confirms your existing beliefs. Confirmation bias can contribute to name confusion. You may read or see a name and interpret that name as something that you're more familiar with. When proprietary names are orthographically similar, poor handwriting can contribute to medication errors. In this case, the provider intended to prescribe Avandia, but the prescription was interpreted as Coumadin. In this second look-alike, sound-alike example, you'll see it's difficult to tell whether the prescriber intends to prescribe Ranexa or Pranexa. Electronic prescribing may also play a role in medication errors, since similar proprietary names will often appear sequentially on drop-down menus and may result in selection of the wrong product. On this slide, typing in the first 4 letters of the intended product yielded several different products. Our post-marketing experience suggests that similarity in the beginning of a proprietary name may potentiate wrong drug errors that occur during selection of a drug product during electronic ordering. When FDA begins a review for a proposed proprietary name, we first pre-screen the name for known error-prone attributes. We first consider whether the proposed proprietary name has obvious similarity to other names. In the example on the slide, you'll see that the proposed name is similar both in spelling and pronunciation to the example. We also evaluate whether the proposed name contains reference to inert or inactive ingredients. We recommend that proposed proprietary names do not incorporate any reference to inactive ingredients because doing so may create a misleading impression that the inactive ingredient's value is greater than its true functional role in the formulation. For fixed combination drug product names, we evaluate the proposed name to ensure that it does not include or suggest the name of one or more, but not all, of its active ingredients, because such names may mislead the end user to believe that the product contains only the ingredient suggested by the proprietary name. FDA recommends that sponsors refrain from using the proprietary name of a product that is no longer marketed to introduce a different drug product because there is a strong risk that end users may continue to associate the name with the original discontinued product. Prescribers often continue to use the proprietary name of discontinued drugs. For example, when prescribing a drug for which there are marketed generics, prescribers may refer to the proprietary name of the discontinued brand version. Proprietary names associated with discontinued drug products may also continue to appear in drug product reference texts and electronic media for extended periods of time. We also screen each proprietary name for the presence of a United States adopted name, or USAN stem. USAN stems are intended to indicate a pharmacological or chemical trait of a drug. Proprietary names should not incorporate USAN stems in the position designated by USAN, because even when using these stems within the consistent USAN meaning, it may result in the creation of multiple similar proprietary names, or proprietary names that are similar to the established names for other drug products, which may lead to increased risk of medication error. Of note, FDA will no longer object to the presence of two-letter stems. I've displayed the two-letter stems on this slide for your reference. FDA has determined that the two-letter stems are often not distinct enough to be recognized as USAN stems in a proprietary name. Also, some of the two-letter stems are outdated and have very few associations, and in some cases are rarely used. Additionally, based on our post-market experience, the two-letter stems have not raised similar safety concerns that we've identified with the longer USAN stems. Brand name extension is the use of a proprietary name that is already associated with a marketed drug product to introduce a new product that does not share at least one active ingredient with the marketed product. Sponsors should avoid use of brand name extension because healthcare professionals familiar with an existing product name may, in some cases, equate that product's proprietary name with the product's active ingredients, uses, or even safety profile. Following our pre-screening of each proposed name, we also evaluate each name for other error-prone attributes. We also screen each proprietary name for the inclusion of medical abbreviations. Sponsors are generally discouraged from incorporating symbols, dose designations, and medical abbreviations commonly used for prescription communication in their proposed proprietary name, because inclusion of these could inadvertently introduce a source of error. We recommend consulting the Joint Commission's Do Not Use list or the Institute for Safe Medication Practices list of error-prone abbreviations, symbols, and dose designations to help determine whether a proposed proprietary name contains an element that is subject to misinterpretation. When evaluating a proposed proprietary name that contains an abbreviation or symbol, FDA considers other factors, such as placement and presentation of the abbreviation or symbol, to determine the likelihood that the name will be error-prone. As an example, the abbreviation PO typically appears after the drug name in a medication order to convey that a product should be administered orally. The inclusion of the letters PO at the beginning of a proprietary name is unlikely to be misconstrued as a medical abbreviation. However, if PO is used at the end of a proprietary name, it may be mistaken as an abbreviation for the oral route of administration. This could result in medication errors if the proposed drug product is not intended to be administered by the oral route of administration. For flexibility in future product development and naming, FDA recommends that sponsors avoid incorporating product-specific attributes, such as manufacturing characteristics, dosage form, or route of administration, as part of the proposed proprietary name. It is not uncommon for product-specific attributes to change during a drug's life cycle, with subsequent introductions of new dosing intervals, formulations, dosage forms, indications, and patient populations. If considering a proprietary name that includes or refers to a product-specific attribute, Sponsors should be mindful that future changes could render the proprietary name inaccurate and unusable for future formulations. If references to a product-specific attribute are included in a proposed proprietary name, FDA will evaluate the name to ensure that the product-specific attribute is consistent with the product's labeling and does not pose risk for medication error. Proprietary names should not incorporate the sponsor's name or some part of the sponsor's name across multiple products in the sponsor's line. Our concern is that this naming practice results in creating multiple similar proprietary names, which increases the risk of confusion across the products. Some proprietary names are constructed of a root proprietary name modified by added words or components which are referred to as modifiers. Sponsors may elect to use this naming strategy to distinguish among multiple products in a product line. Modifiers are often used to convey distinguishing product characteristics, a particular delivery device component, or some other aspect of the product. Our post-marketing experience has shown that inconsistencies in the use of modifiers and the absence of a standardized meaning for some modifiers have been a source of confusion to end users. Confusion stemming from the use of modifiers in proprietary names has led to medication errors, such as dispensing and administering the wrong formulation, wrong dose, wrong strength, or wrong frequency of administration. Medication errors have also occurred within the same product line if the distinguishing modifier is omitted when a product is prescribed or dispensed. Our naming guidance provides several best practices to consider when selecting a modifier. When FDA evaluates a proposed proprietary name that contains a modifier, we first consider whether there is a need for a modifier. We will also carefully consider whether the modifier conveys accurate information about the product and whether it effectively differentiates the product from other products in the product line. For novel modifiers, we consider the intended meaning, and we review any data provided by the sponsor to support that end users understand the intended meaning. We also consider the placement of the modifier in relation to the root proprietary name and the risks associated with misinterpretation or omission of the modifier. Finally, we consider whether the modifier is already in use for marketed products and whether it has been shown to be a known source of confusion. Whenever possible, FDA encourages sponsors to select an existing modifier with an established meaning that has not been a source of confusion. For your reference, I've provided a list of commonly used modifiers for prescription products that have commonly understood meanings. As an example, XR and ER are typically used to indicate or convey that the product is an extended release product. As another example, ODT is typically used to indicate that the product is orally disintegrating. Similarly, on this next slide, I've included a list of modifiers typically used in the non-prescription space with understood meaning. For example, the modifier allergy is usually to convey that the product is used for the treatment of allergy symptoms. PM is typically used to convey that it's for nighttime use. Let's talk about naming a product that goes from prescription to non-prescription use, also known as Rx-to-OTC switch. FDA evaluates proposals for naming on a case-by-case basis when a drug product is switched from prescription to OTC status. In scenarios where the full switch will occur to OTC, whereby all indications, dosage forms, strengths, etc. are all switched to the OTC marketplace. The sponsor may consider use of the original name, a modified version of the original name, or the sponsor may elect to use a novel name. However, when a product is partially switched to OTC, meaning only some indications or dosage forms or strengths are switched to OTC status, it is unlikely that it would be appropriate for the sponsor to use the original name. The sponsor may propose, however, a modified version of the original name, or again may elect to use a novel name for the product. That brings us to our first challenge question. Which of the following proposed proprietary names is likely to generate an objection from FDA? A. Inclusion of the abbreviation IV for an intravenous product. B. Inclusion of the USAN stem statin for a cholesterol-lowering product. C. Inclusion of the abbreviation PO for an oral tablet. Or D. Inclusion of the modifier ODT for an orally disintegrating tablet. If you chose B, you got it right. FDA will object to a name that contains a USAN stem in the position designated by USAN for the stem. As part of our evaluation for proposed proprietary names, we also do a review for misbranding and other legal concerns. Although our naming guidance focus primarily on aspects of proprietary names that can contribute to medication error, sponsors should also avoid using a proprietary name that could contribute to any violation of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. The FD&C Act provides that a drug is misbranded if its labeling is false or misleading in any particular. A proprietary name could be false or misleading by making representations with respect to safety or efficacy. For instance, a fanciful proprietary name may misbrand a product by suggesting that it has some unique effectiveness or composition when it is actually a common substance. For example, a proposed proprietary name that contains the word cure or sounds like cure for a drug that treats symptoms associated with a chronic disease would be concerning. The word cure is defined as something that stops a disease or makes someone healthy again, or something that ends a problem or improves a bad situation. Therefore, if a proposed proprietary name for a chronic disease contains or sounds like cure, it may overstate the clinical benefit by misleadingly implying that the product can cure the chronic condition. If a sponsor chooses to conduct a misbranding review, the review should focus on identifying whether the proposed proprietary name overstates the product efficacy or safety, expands the product indications, suggests superiority without substantiation, or misleadingly implies unique effectiveness or composition. One possible study methodology is outlined in the appendices of our guidance for sponsors who choose to review it. Our draft guidance for industry also discusses methods for evaluating similarity of a proposed name to other names. I'll cover the highlights here, but I encourage you to look at the guidance for more information. When conducting our look-alike, sound-alike safety assessment, we consider the phonetic, spelling, and orthographic similarity of the proposed name. To inform our review, we conduct name simulation studies, and we search names in FDA's Phonetic and Orthographic Computer Analysis Program, which is also known as POCA. Once we identify names that are similar to the proposed name, we categorize each name pair as high, moderate, or low similarity based on the POCA score. We then use the checklists that are in the appendix of the draft guidance to determine whether the name is safe. Name simulation studies are intended to test how subjects respond to a proposed proprietary name by asking them to use the name in use conditions that simulate the real world. The more closely and fully the simulation approximates real-world use, the more generalizable the results of the simulation testing will be. Name simulation tasks should reflect the full range and variety of tasks involved in selecting, purchasing, prescribing, transcribing, dispensing, and administering of the drug product. Simulations should include common characteristics of real-world use, such as using ruled or unruled paper, prescription pads, computer order entry, and telephone orders to approximate written, oral, and electronic prescribing in the setting of care for your proposed product. The simulation study should present the proprietary name with the corresponding product characteristics such as strength, route, dosage, and frequency that are likely to be used to communicate prescriptions and orders for the proposed product. We also recommend that study participants in the study are representative of the full range of end users that are likely to interact with your proposed product during the medication use process. Results of the study should be carefully analyzed to identify potential errors. The appendices of our naming guidance provide an outline of the elements that are recommended for considerations if sponsors choose to conduct their own simulation study. FDA's prescription simulation program was designed in 2003 to test for potential confusion of proposed proprietary names with that of marketed or pending drug names using written and verbal simulated prescriptions. However, as the use of electronic prescribing, or CPOE, has increased, FDA has recognized the need to test for potential errors related to drug name displays and has modified our program. In late 2019, we implemented a CPOE prescription simulation module designed to provide a drug name display and user interface that is not specific to any particular CPOE system. This module is intended to test for name confusion between the proposed proprietary name and any drug names that may appear in a drop-down list during order entry and in an electronic prescribing scenario. On this slide, I've provided an example prescription simulation for the product Acefex. Our software distributes the study samples to voluntary FDA participants. Each participant will only participate in one type of prescription sample. In the top box, you'll see a written medication order intended to simulate the order that you might see in a hospital-like setting. Below that, you'll see a written outpatient prescription intended to simulate that of an outpatient setting prescription. On the bottom of the screen, you see just an example of the typewritten name Acefex that is shown in the CPOE study sample interface. Finally, on the right of the screen, you'll see a transcription of the verbal simulated prescription that is provided to the participant through a voicemail system. Upon receipt of the prescription sample, the participant is asked then to transcribe their interpretation into the software program. The results are retrievable by our safety evaluators who look closely at them. The simulation software will produce results similar to those on the screen, listing each interpretation and the study sample it was derived from. FDA reviewers carefully analyze each of the results, evaluating for trends and opportunities for name confusion. We look closely for direct matches with other names or responses that appear to be close variations to other names, as verbatim or close responses might confirm a potential for confusion. More importantly, responses may identify additional names of concern that are not identified through our computational searches. Although we believe that FDA simulation studies that identify name confusion are good predictors for errors that could be expected to occur in actual use, our studies may not be sufficiently sensitive to reliably identify all the risks associated with a proposed proprietary name. For those reasons, we believe it would be useful, although not required, for sponsors to conduct more comprehensive studies. Should a sponsor choose to conduct a prescription simulation study and choose to include that in the submission, FDA will use that as part of our evaluation of the name. In addition to our name simulation studies, FDA uses POCA to identify similar names to the proposed name. POCA is a software tool that uses advanced algorithms to determine the orthographic and phonetic similarity between two drug names. POCA was first released to the public in 2009 and is available for download at the link I've provided on the screen. We use POCA to compare a drug name against multiple drug names contained in both internal and external data sources. The publicly available data sources in the most recent version are drugs at FDA, which we update monthly, Rx-Norm, which is updated monthly, and suffixes in the proper name of approved biologic products, also updated monthly. Finally, POCA will also search the name against the list of USAN stems, which is updated whenever the USAN stems are updated. POCA is a central component of our safety review. Each proposed proprietary name is entered into the software program, and the software program provides 3 data sets. The first set is the combined orthographic and phonetic matches. The second set is phonetic matches, and the third set is orthographic matches. The combined measure of similarity has been positively correlated to errors involving name confusion and is how POCA was validated. Higher scores from POCA equate with a greater similarity between the proposed name and the name that's identified in the pair. We continue to work on improving POCA system performance to meet our needs. In December of 2016, FDA revised the POCA algorithm to change the orthographic component. The revised algorithm is designed to better capture the shift in types of medication errors that are being reported due to the use of electronic prescribing. The algorithm is revised to place more emphasis on similarity that occurs at the beginning of the word, on exact letter matches, and on both consecutive and non-consecutive shared letters. The POCA software was also revised to give the same orthographic similarity score if the candidate and source names are switched, thereby providing a uniform bidirectional score regardless of which order the names are entered into the system. Also, to accommodate for the increased sensitivity of the revised algorithm, FDA has changed the scores that we associate with low and moderate similarity. When we categorize name pairs identified from POCA, FDA considers name pairs with a combined score of greater than or equal to 70% to be a highly similar name pair. For moderately similar name pairs, we use a threshold of greater than or equal to 55% to less than or equal to 69%. Note that previously we used a threshold of greater than or equal to 50%, so the change in this threshold is to accommodate for the increased sensitivity. Similarly, for low similarity names, we use a threshold of the combined score less than or equal to 54%, whereby this was previously cut off at a threshold of less than 49%. Once we've queried POCA, we export the results and evaluate each of the name pairs further. The exported results from POCA will provide 3 data sets. The first set will be the combined orthographic and phonetic matches. The second set will be the phonetic matches, and the third set will be the orthographic matches. We take the combined orthographic and phonetic matches and we group the name pairs into one of the following 3 categories: the highly similar name pair, the moderately similar name pair, and the low similarity name pair. To analyze each name pair, checklists are provided in our draft guidance for each similarity category using the principles of failure mode and effects analysis. The checklists are intended to increase the transparency and predictability of the safety determination of whether a proposed proprietary name is vulnerable to confusion from a look-alike or sound-alike perspective. We evaluate each name pair individually using these checklists to make our determination. For highly similar name pairs that score greater than 70% in POCA, our post-marketing experience suggests that differences in product characteristics, including differences such as strength and/or dose, often are not sufficient to mitigate the risk of a medication error. Therefore, highly similar names are at greater risk for look-alike and sound-alike confusion. We have also determined and identified similar concerns with name pairs that have individual orthographic or phonetic scores of greater than 70%. Therefore, we treat the highly similar names with the combined score of greater than 70 or individual scores greater than 70 in alignment with the process I'm about to describe on this slide. Once we've identified the highly similar names, we use the checklists provided in the appendices of our guidance for highly similar names. The checklist focuses first on whether the names themselves have sufficient orthographic or phonetic differences to avoid confusion. Orthographically, we consider whether the names begin with different first letters, whether the lengths of the names are dissimilar, and whether there is a different number or placement of upstroke, downstroke, or cross-stroke letters in the name. Phonetically, we consider whether the names have a different number of syllables or different syllabic stress patterns. We also consider pronunciation of the name across a range of dialects. If we determine the names are viewed as sufficiently different, then we also consider the influence of product characteristics on the potential for confusion. This is described in the moderately similar checklist in our guidance. When our evaluation is complete, we consider the POCA results, the results from the name simulation study, and the answers to the checklist questions combined with the product characteristics for the name pairs when we make a determination on the acceptability of a proposed name. For moderately similar name pairs, the checklist in our guidance considers the same orthographic and phonetic considerations as those contained in the highly similar checklist. However, FDA will also review all moderately similar name pairs further to determine whether the products have overlapping or similar strengths or doses. The dose and strength information is often located in close proximity to the drug name on prescriptions and medication orders, and that information may be an important factor that either increases or decreases the potential for confusion between similarly named drug pairs. The ability of other product characteristics to mitigate confusion, such as route of administration or frequency of administration, may be limited when the strength or dose overlaps. When evaluating whether a strength or dose overlaps, we are careful to consider the circumstances where strength may be omitted for example, with products that are available only in a single strength. Similarly, for any drug products comprised of more than one active ingredient, we consider whether the strength or dose may be expressed using only one of the components, and whether that component overlaps with the other name pair. Finally, FDA's reviewers also consider alternative expressions of dose. For example, the prescribing information may list the dose as 5 milliliters, but the prescription may express the dose in metric units, for example, 500 milligrams, or in non-metric units, 1 teaspoon, 1 capsule, 1 tablet. A strength or dose of 1,000 milligrams may be expressed in practice as 1 gram, or vice versa. Phonetically, we also take into consideration doses that sound like other doses. For example, 15 milligrams may sound similar to 50 milligrams. We evaluate each of these characteristics as part of our evaluation of the safety and acceptability of the name. Name pairs with low similarity are generally found acceptable unless there is data to suggest that the name might be vulnerable to confusion. For example, should a name simulation study suggest that the proprietary name is likely to be misinterpreted as that of a marketed product? In these instances, we would reassign a low similarity name to the moderately similar category and evaluate it in accordance with those checklists. As I described previously, product characteristics play an important role in our evaluation of a name pair. Product strength and dose is an important consideration, as the dose and strength information is often located in close proximity to the drug name and can either increase or decrease the potential for confusion, particularly with moderately similar drug name pairs. If none of the strengths overlap, the potential for name confusion may be lowered. Consider, for example, name confusion that's occurred between Intuniv and Invega. Our post-marketing experience suggests that the 3 milligram strengths of Intuniv have been confused with the 3 milligram strengths for Invega. However, Intuniv 1 milligram, 2 milligram, and 4 milligram have not been confused with the Invega 1.5, 6, and 9 milligram product strengths. Conversely, for highly similar name pairs, differences in the product profile may not reliably reduce the risk of error. Consider that confusion has occurred when doses, therapeutic uses, dosage forms, route of administration, and setting of use are different. I've listed 3 examples. Cerebex, an injectable anticonvulsant drug, has been confused with Celebrex, an oral non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. Advair, an inhaled product, has been confused with Advicor, a tablet. And Durasol, a topical wart remover, has been confused with Durezol, an ophthalmic eye drop. In conclusion, FDA's recommendations in our naming guidance are intended to help sponsors avoid developing a proprietary name that is likely to contribute to medication errors or otherwise contribute to violations of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. When evaluating a proposed proprietary name, FDA considers the information and analysis about the proposed proprietary name described in our guidance, along with any additional name-related information submitted by the sponsor. Assessments of the proprietary name are fact-specific, and FDA's determinations are made on a case-by-case basis considering the totality of this information. FDA may reject a name If based on the information provided or on its own review, we determine the name causes confusion with other products that can result in medication errors or preventable harm, or if the name is misleading with respect to the therapeutic effectiveness, composition, or safety of the product. That brings us to our second challenge question. Which is most likely to potentiate the risk for name confusion in moderately similar names? A. The same frequency of administration. B. The same strength and dose. C. The same route of administration. Or D. The same indication of use. If you chose B, you got it right. Similarity in strength and dose is most likely to potentiate risk of confusion in moderately similar names. For your reference, I've included hyperlinks to documents pertinent to proprietary naming at the reference slide at the end of this presentation. With that, I'll conclude my presentation and open the floor for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle.